All right, welcome back. We are here for this block of time to do a few bill introductions between now and 11 to 15. And with us this morning, I'm going to end up doing a couple of bills that I didn't get to yesterday. And but we're going to start with Representative Burrows, who's going to introduce H317, which is an act relating to improving the accessibility of certain residential buildings. Welcome.
Thank you. For the record, I am Elizabeth Burrows. I represent Windsor One, which is Heartland, West Windsor, and Windsor, if you haven't got that memorized by now.
Are you sitting in the Windsor chair?
Oh.
Thank you, Representative Labor.
Well, this bill simply requires either ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, or the potential for such for new residential units being built. A swath of our population is being really left out of the conversation about the building of new housing across our state. And the first actually two swaths of people are being left out. The first swath being people who live with disabilities and can't get around very easily in normal residences, but also our aging population, which currently may not be experiencing difficulties getting around or their residences, but may in the future. And with our forced reliance on aging in place because of lack of spaces in advanced care units, and because of our projected growth of our aging population over the course of the next decade to be approximately a quarter of Vermont's population, including the ADA compliance or potential for ADA compliance, and I'll explain that in just a second, could not only free up housing by providing more manageable housing for aging Vermonters currently stuck in their homes, but it could also help to accommodate the growing or potentially growing population of people who live with disabilities. And 24% of people who experience homelessness nationwide are people who live with disabilities. That is particularly chronic homelessness. And that is in part because they don't get paid a regular, even minimum wage. But also the shelters are not ADA compliant. And so that this may add to an alleviation of that problem as well. The bill asks for either full ADA compliance or the potential for such, which simply means that you're building a house and you could design a doorway, or you could design a doorway with an extra frame around the outside of the doorway so that the doorway could be expanded to accommodate a wheelchair or other assistive device. And same with all doorways in the new building. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the building has to be ADA compliant at its beginning construction, but it should have the potential to have that The bill also asks for dwellings on the ground floor to be visitable, which means that somebody with who uses an assistive device would be able to get inside the building. And section 2 simply asks for that we don't have a statute currently prioritizing people with disabilities for apartments that can accommodate them. So it simply asks that if there is an apartment available and there is a person with a disability, if there is an ADA compliant apartment available and there is a person with a disability applying to reside in the apartment, that person be bumped to the top of the list of applicants. It doesn't mean that the apartment has to be held open for somebody with a disability, sort of like bathroom stalls. If there is a person who needs to use disabled person's bathroom stall, then they would be allowed to use the stall. Otherwise, the line continues as it normally would. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, and is that in all housing or is that in, I mean, I know that in some of the new apartments that were built by Down Street Housing, by the nonprofit housing agency in Waterbury, for instance, I don't think there were more than a couple out of the 27 units that were 80, that had the tub or the shower stall.
Right.
Where they built it so that it was accessible. They built it so that the counters were lower. Yep. So would it be, I mean, I would be making an assumption that this would apply mostly to nonprofit or affordable housing complexes, or would this for everybody?
This is for everybody. And currently, a federal law dictates that any federal monies used to build housing units have to include universal design, at least a portion of them.
Right.
This is for individual residences. It sort of expands that law to include smaller units because.
Please finish your sentence.
Yes.
Which wouldn't necessarily be using federal funding.
Representative Chisentation.
Can you speak briefly about, is there a difference between universal design and ADA compliance?
I believe universal design includes the potential for ADA compliance, not just automatic ADA.
It's a broader
framework,
and ADA compliance is a checklist. Is that fair?
So, Representative LeBaron?
Just for clarification, so are you suggesting that if I build a house and that's a 2-story and I have the bedrooms upstairs and all the other living room, everything downstairs, that I need to have some sort of framework for an elevator to go up and down?
You need to be able to have
Or lift,
an elevator isn't required, but the downstairs has to accommodate a person. That's what makes it visitable.
An article was shared with me from this winter about and I don't know if it was condos or if it was in cooperatives. There's an infamous issue with condominiums which operate under their own law, essentially. And this could apply somewhat to private roads and private homeowners associations, where all of our rules may not apply. The question was about, and I can't remember if there was a conflict about building a ramp, or whether it, did this fall into an argument within a condo or a co-op situation where somebody was the same kind of argument that people have over laundry lines or
Right.
appurtenances to their condos where the homeowner association, condo association says, no, everything has to look the same. And would that be an element of universal design that would be part of this change, that you have to have at least be able to build a ramp easily?
Yes, but not for existing dwellings. This is all for all new. And this is not for big apartment units. This is just for smaller, up to, I think it's up to 3 units, buildings. So I don't know that it would apply.
Okay. All right, yes, Representative Howard.
Based on my experience, we had to sort of remodel our home, put in the shower bars and remove all the scatter rugs, et cetera, et cetera. We had ramp built. And when I was touring the Lincoln House apartments in Rutland, I noticed all these things, and I mentioned to them that there are no shower bars in the shower, and you don't have to have a disability. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone should have shower bars in their facilities. So I think this bill is very important. And a friend of mine, when she was building her house, she made sure it was accessible with the wide doors, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that it was a little bit of a problem for us when we had to call the ambulance.
Yeah.
And they had to kind of maneuver the bed to try and get through. They had to back it into another doorway to bed. And I think that's an important thing to think about as well.
I agree.
For older residents. So, thank you.
Well, it's for, I mean, it really is not just for every resident, it's for everybody.
Right.
You know, when I was contemplating this bill, my son pointed out that I had told him about the Barbie Dreamhouse incident, which was that the Mattel Corporation created a Barbie doll, which used a wheelchair, and in 2019, and everybody was really excited about it, except that the Barbie doll in the wheelchair couldn't get through a single doorway in the Barbie dream house. And so that is to say that we sometimes forget that that these problems exist for people who can't get around very easily or people who use assistive devices. Every aspect of their lives are affected by being kind of left out of different conversations. And that's what gives this bill something of an urgency, why I brought it forward this term or this session, is that while we are talking with urgency about building housing, it needs to be part of the conversation. And it needs to not be forgotten, so.
So
Thank you.
in other words, so we just passed the bill about this, and we're gonna hear more testimony this week about the missing middle home ownership.
Yep.
Where we dedicated X amount of dollars to help builders if there's the disparity between the cost of building and the assessed value or appraised value. So if somebody needed $50,000 to $100,000 and we funded it last year with ARPA dollars, which were federal dollars, they would have to adhere to building codes automatically.
Yep.
But the homes that might be built if we use general fund dollars would not be required by any of our laws to be accessible.
Right.
There you have it in a nutshell. Okay.
I was just going to say, without a contractor registry, how do the builders know that they need to be compliant?
Yep.
Just thought I'd throw that in there to muddy the words a little.
And I should also add that Mattel did eventually build a fully accessible Barbie dream house. It came out last year.
Is the Barbie in the wheelchair, are her feet still shaped for high-heeled shoes? Or?
That I don't know. I don't have one, but
I would imagine that
Probably not.
there must have been somebody who took a reciprocating saw to the Barbie dream house and did some renovations as well. Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
To think that it's still, since the ADA was passed however many years ago, that we're still, to paraphrase Representative Pat, boy, we still have to put this stuff forward.
it seems impossible to me that there isn't any statute saying that people with disabilities be prioritized for ADA compliant housing, but here we are. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing me.
And
Thank you for
we'll,
being ready so quickly. Just hit our wall yesterday, so.
and we'll now hear from Representative Stevens on H213, followed by H213, an act relating to creating a study committee on mobile homes and mobile home parks, followed by H137, an act relating to expanding the Vermont Housing Improvement Program.
These Representative Tom Stevens from Waterbury. These are two short form bills. And again, my feeling about me putting my name on some bills is because they're either things that other people don't know about, or they've been remnants of years past, sort of legacy bills that haven't been passed yet. But in this particular case for H213, this is something that this concept is something that I would like to be able to include in what will be our growing housing bill. My thoughts about our housing bill, you might have seen that the Senate passed out a housing bill yesterday that they've been working on since January. And we'll put together a bill that has some rental oriented things. But there's this is a bill to propose simply to create a study committee on mobile homes and mobile home parks. Manufactured homes should probably be a phrase that's included in that. And the needs around infrastructure, flood protections, and resident rights. And these are things that there hasn't been a full study on mobile home parks since about 2009. And since then, there's been Tropical Storm Irene, which wiped out a high percentage of mobile homes. A higher percentage of mobile homes were damaged because a lot of the traditional building areas for mobile homes were around rivers. That was zoning or non-zoning that was allowed in the 50s when mobile homes started to come in. We pay attention to mobile homes and mobile home parks because they provide a fairly high percentage, I believe 8 or 9% of what we might consider affordable housing, or housing that's affordable. And it's a complicated system because on one hand, mobile homes prior to 1976 and perhaps even after that basically were considered like automobiles because they were mobile. And in recent years, in the last probably 15 years, we've seen an increase of what we would call manufactured homes, which are not mobile homes, but they might be in the same shape or the same style and the same park system. We know that mobile home parks around the state, we heard a little bit yesterday from the finance folks who wanted to invest in budget proposal, some $10 million into community water systems and infrastructure systems. Many of the mobile home parks, and this would be about mobile homes and mobile home parks, because we have to acknowledge that, if there's one or two mobile homes on a lot, that's not a park. But we have a substantial number of mobile home parks. Infrastructure has rarely been improved. We have seen some investments with the federal money that's come through in the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, the governor just announced that $14 million went out to help with some of the infrastructure projects that are going on in mobile home parks across the state. And the other piece with resident rights is that we have a fairly strong setup with if someone who owns a park wants to sell, we have a fairly lengthy process where residents have the right of first refusal. They might have an opportunity to do a cooperative. They might have an opportunity to try to find a nonprofit organization to purchase, though nonprofit organizations generally tend to not purchase them if they do not have infrastructure like water and sewer already in the park. So on one hand, we addressed many of the issues that were brought up in the previous study, but that was 15 years ago. And there's elements that have to do with zoning, as we've been hearing, resilience. There's a park in Brattleboro where they're moving, I think, 35 homes. That was legislation that came through this committee over the last several years of trying to find funding for planning to move people away from the river and up above, which is never been done, or as far as I know, not moving a third of a park up away from the riverside is new for us. I mean, it's rare anywhere, but it's just it's one of the largest parks in the state. So to displace that many people would have been a loss of, so there's an element of preservation of going on. So I wanted to be able to consider this for inclusion as a summer study committee again, to really take everything we know that's been happening over the last 15 years and put it into a place again that we can consider was highly successful 15 years ago. And it drove our policy making, a lot of which was relying on money and funding available. We could hear testimony on that a mobile home park owner should be providing reasonable roads, for instance. And that was a huge, it seems like it's a no-brainer, but it was a big deal because of the expense involved with keeping a road up in essentially what's a field. If it's not, there's plenty of mobile home parks that have solid infrastructure, but there's many where they just haven't been able to invest over time. So this would be an inventory of what the problem is, and if we were to take it up, we'd vote to take it off the wall because it's a short form, and then we would consider it for a summer study committee this summer.
Are there new mobile home parks being created, or is this a legacy system?
Primarily a legacy system. There's very few. The cost of mobile homes, the cost of everything has gone up, but the ability to find a place where you can lay in the infrastructure needed, almost any developer might decide that building homes would be a better way of treating that project. But that said, we have space available. There are slots available throughout the state. But the creation of new parks is much rarer. The thing about the selling of the park, which is just it's kind of the legislation that we have already, the statute that we already have is a form of preservation to try to, the park, if it's like only 6 people, might be very difficult for people to decide that they want to own the park together, where if it's 100 units, it's a little bit easier and more affordable. But we have read across the country that do not have the protections that we have for people, that there are investment companies that are buying up mobile home parks in other areas of the country, and it hasn't really hit here yet because our regulations are pretty stiff, and they give a lot of protection. But a lot of people are seeing their mobile home parks being sold, services being cut, people moving out, and eventually they'll redevelop. The plan is to redevelop those things, those areas, because it's land. So, so that's what this would address. This is what, if we were to consider it, we would take a look at what we did in 2009 and just do a punch list of issues and find out the right representatives for that committee.
Representative Burrows.
Thank you. I wondered whether yourself, whether there are separate floodplain regulations for mobile home parks as opposed to other types of
If the
parcels.
park existed, any kind of regulation that's been put in from the time it was built, they are given a pass. The local park, local to us in Duxbury, they were damaged heavily after the flood. And what they ran into was they wanted to realign the park from 19 units to like 10. And they wanted to, but the regulations were that if they did that, if they reconfigured their park and reset their pads and reset their water, they would lose their Act 250 exemption from having been there already, because Act 250 didn't exist when the park was built. But if they rebuilt or if they put homes back on the same pads, then it was repairing that which was there, and they would have retained their exemption. So that's just the way we do a lot of things. We don't do retroactive legislation on property rights very easily.
Well, I wondered whether FEMA had rejiggered their, after everything that happened along Route 100, whether FEMA had come in and rejiggered all of the definitions of.
Well, they redid the maps, which of course can hang out in litigation, I know in some
Right.
areas, but I think people are prevented from building it. You can't build right up to the riverside. And you have to have, I think new construction has to have an infrastructure system, waste infrastructure.
Thank
Are
you.
there further questions on this bit? If not,
Right.
thank you. We can segue into
37. I did this because, again, we're gonna see a bill, either H111 or the Senate bill. That, is that a sneeze?
just a cough, sorry.
Okay. That God won't bless you. We're going to hear about the Vermont Housing Improvement Program, and we've heard that it has, it's originally dealt with apartments that were out of code, and then we added ADUs to that, and then there's proposals that we heard about yesterday. This was brought to me by the Disabilities Council and representatives from the Disability Council. And the situation here is that there are a diminishing number of folks who open their homes to folks with disability in the home share situation. And it's an important service that again, owners of homes are either aging out. It's difficult because it's become expensive for the modifications to do a ramp to make your home to widen doorways, etc. As we heard from Representative Burrows. The other factor is that I believe either Medicaid and or HUD are changing their regulations so that if you were interested in care for somebody with disabilities, you would have already needed to do the renovations. Like the house has to be ready to go to accept a person, instead of, hey, maybe we want to do this we'll bring the person in and figure out what we need after. But they're changing the regulations. And so the question put forward to me is, can we make this program available to people who are working to have to do home share modifications to accommodate Vermonters with disabilities? And so really, if this language, even something as simple as this were to go into a bill, it would be easy for us to just pick it out and drop it into the any bill that we have on VHIP. But I didn't feel like having the attorneys do a 15-page bill to drop this language in.
Representative Parsons.
Thank you. Just, I guess, more of a comment than a question. When I first saw this, my thought process went straight to, well, maybe the allocation of funds when you're remodeling could be, there's a separate tier for if it's going to be ADA compliant. You can get up to 40 or 50 for a single unit, and up to maybe 70 for a 3-bedroom or something.
Yeah.
That was just kind of how I thought a system like this would work well with minimal, like I said, 15 pages of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, because what we heard yesterday was it's like $30,000 for up to 2 bedrooms, and then it could go up to $50,000 for more than 2 bedrooms, up to $50,000 for ADUs. And so my concern would be, if we were to insert anything like this in a bigger bill that addressed the total program, is how would you be able to segregate money, put money aside, put 15% of the money that is being put towards VHIP for this, but I don't need an answer for that question.
Representative Howard, yes.
Just for clarification, the funding is for the renovations to take place before the person moves into the house? What about,
Well, that's the requirements from the federal government are changing so that they have to be done before a person moves in. And we can get testimony on that as well from Disabilities Council, but
okay.
was that?
Well, I'm just curious as to why couldn't the funding be for someone who all of a sudden needs to have the remodeling done while they're living in the house?
Well, right, if somebody had a stroke or something, that's not covered by this particular language. I'm not saying it's not important, and I think we've all had or know family members that needed.
I think it's a different scenario too. If you're offering a unit for rent, does it meet certain conditions, as opposed to somebody's requirements change when they're in?
Right, I understand.
Sash.
Right.
And there are very few programs that do offer some form of help with that, but I mean, it's usually geared towards low-income individuals and not simply, my husband's getting out of the hospital next Thursday, I need to be able to get him in and out of the house kind of thing.
Thank you.
That's it for me.
There, any further comments, questions? Hans?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And we are, we have time left. We're representing, welcoming Commissioner Hanford at 11:15.
Yeah.
And so please be back by 11:15.
Yeah, let's make a full break.
Thank you.